Greetings, friends. This video is dark humor. There are 14 threads here. I will begin with number 1, smartphone culture. So many of us have smartphones these days. I don't have internet on my phone, but I know it's quite normal. Probably most smartphones will have internet before long anyways. I think you won't even pay extra. It'll just be automatic. So not long after that, or maybe we're already getting this, I don't know, but before long, in maybe 20 or 30 years, we'll be putting little chips in our brains, maybe in some certain part of the brain, and then a lot of people will be so plugged into their phones already that they won't think anything of doing that. They'll be like, hey, why not, man? Like, well, you don't have a chip in your brain? Oh, you're lame, man. What's wrong with you? And some people resist that, but you get a lot of youth like really plugging in, and then with that, they'll be wearing these virtual reality sunglasses all the time, and they'll be having they'll be seeing people, but then they'll be seeing like stupid Japanese Pokemon creatures in the background, and they'll be seeing different things. It's supposed to alert. It's supposed to give you a red alert if you're going to walk into a car, or so they're trying to figure that out. They're not trying to. They want you to stay alive, but they want you to be in this hyper reality. So you got this little chip, you plug in at certain times, or maybe you're plugged in all the time, and then start having to plug up your brain and recharge the batteries, take out the microchip maybe and fix it up and update it, or not, or you can update it all. And then they engineer these little nano creatures, these micrological nano robots that go into your bloodstream, repairing things. And so basically you're wearing these 24/7 sunglasses, virtual reality, and you're sleeping. It's going to use it. Can even make you sleep. Can even hypnotize you if you want it to. Well, it's doing that anyways, but they have certain programs for that. So eventually you have these android humans, about 5% of the population, and at some point regular humans are like, hey, we don't like this, and you get a big war between the androids and the regular humans, and it's a very terrible war. And but the androids basically get stamped out because they're heavily outnumbered in the end. And then the result of that war, who knows? Well, who knows what kind of society we have then, because a lot of stuff has to be sacrificed to be able to defeat these androids, basically any privacy. So at the end of that world, there's no privacy anyways. Number 2. Sometimes Lake Ontario stinks. So because I live in Toronto, I can vouch for that, but I guess anyone living along the northern shore of Lake Ontario, I don't know if it stinks out in Kingston or other places not close to a big city. I don't know what, but if you live in northern upper New York State, or perhaps other Great Lakes probably stink too. I don't know. I haven't been to Lake Superior, but yeah, some days of the week it just stinks. I don't know if it's dead fish or just algae or, so really nice properties along the lake in certain neighborhoods. But would you really want to have a house there? Why not just, if you live a certain distance away, you won't have that stink coming in. So that's something I've noticed, biking along the lake sometimes. Swimming in Lake Ontario, no, I don't think too many people do that. Not unless you want to get sick. So number 3, there's this book called The Story of Canada, and I guess it came out in the 90s, and it was an educational book teaching you the history of Canada from the beginning of the indigenous, or even after the Ice Age, and then it fast forward to the Europeans coming and how they mixed with the indigenous peoples. And then there was a chapter in this illustrated book, otherwise, because with its fantastic drawings and generally easy to follow material, it was a pretty cool book. But there was this really fucked up chapter, not a fucked up chapter, but it was about the Franklin expedition, or one of these Arctic expeditions around Hudson's Bay or around the north sort of the Arctic, and how people were, some of the crew died and were buried in stone, basically buried in stones because there's no earth there. And later on in the 20th century, archaeologists came back and they found one of these burials and they dug it up. and they included a picture in this children's book of a dead body of a man who was like tied up, and because it was like an Arctic climate, he hadn't really decomposed, so he looked kind of like, he definitely looked dead, but like he still had eyes, he still had an expression. It was like his skin was black, and like, so I remember seeing that as a kid, like, oh, it gave me nightmares for many years. And isn't that fucked up that like you would, like, I don't, like, it's just funny because it's as if that dead body was just like the same as a sunken ship. Like, it's just an artifact, kind of like putting a dead mummy on display in a museum, kind of a similar idea, except with the mummy, it's like, oh, it's definitely, just dried carbon material. But this body was a bit more real, like you could actually see the guy's eyes. So it's fucked up that they put that in a children's book. And I would have these nightmares where that man would come looking for me, and he'd be outside my house, and he'd smell really bad, and everything he touched would be contaminated. And he had these gloves. I don't know why the gloves. I don't know. It's in my dream. So anyways, number 4, there's this documentary. You can find it on YouTube. I don't remember the name of it, but it had to do with the Soviet era, the Cold War era, and how both the Americans and the Soviets were making these nuclear subs and these deep water submarines. And one of the first American deep water subs was launched sometime in the 50s. I'm thinking like, what, 1954? I'm sure they had these things by the early 60s, but sometime around that time they tried the first deep water sub, and it went out on its first mission. And then it's like, okay, we're diving, we're going on our first deep water dive. And they went down, and they dived. And I guess, the way I tell stories, you may imagine where I'm going with this. But basically, yeah, they never got any radio transmission, nothing. They never, huge nuclear sub. Like, it may have had nuclear weapons on it, or would have had a nuclear reactor on it. Just completely lost out in the Atlantic, or in the deep ocean, right? So the big deep ocean. And they never knew what happened to it for decades and decades and decades, until maybe later, I don't know, in the 80s, or definitely after some time had passed, they did scour search the bottom of that part of the Atlantic. I believe it was the Atlantic, I don't know. And eventually they did find these huge scraps of steel, like these gigantic pieces of steel that would be like really hard metal, but they were completely like twisted like a Coke can, like a pop can, just like tearing it apart. So it gives you an idea of when this thing must have been sinking, filled up with air. It would basically be sinking down, and the water pressure would be increasing and increasing and increasing. And at one point, it's kind of like, in the documentary, I'm stealing the guy's words, I don't remember, he's describing, he's like, at one point, it's like a bomb going off. Only like a bomb, not exploding, but like an implosion bomb. Like, boom, on, a mile underneath the ocean. The ocean can be about 2 miles deep in some places. Number 5, I want everyone to check out this really mind-blowing interview, if you're into this extraterrestrial stuff. I know a lot of people are or are not, but it's called it says mind-blowing, Lockheed Skunk Works employee speaks out, technology from extraterrestrials. Now, Lockheed is a aeronautics corporation. They design technology like flight aviation stuff, space technology, all sorts. They've been contractors for the military, contractors for various agencies. They have a lot of knowledge since the pre-war period. And this guy's been working for Lockheed Skunk Works, which was a particular facility, highly covert, even though this is not strictly for the military. He worked for the military too, but he was mostly a private contractor, and all sorts of interesting things to say. He's talking about Area 51, that kind of area, and you might be an engineer and you sign on to this project, and you know how it is, like in the military, you don't know what's going to really happen when you sign on. And because they're seeing, they're watching, okay, how is this guy? Can we trust him? What sort of? And it's like, okay, this engineer, you can continue working on this project, and once you get to a certain level, they bring out these little people. And I'm just quoting what the guy says. He's like, you know, this one engineer is working underground in this facility, working on a flight trainer or, you know, building some flight simulator for some new craft, because they design all sorts of top secret craft. And yeah, at some point, these little people just came out. These little children, super intelligent children. And then, you know, these little guys, and you had to work with them. And they were basically working with this human engineer to design this new flight trainer. And then he says, you know, before long, it was just like you and me just sitting here working with these little people. You know, wherever they were from. He didn't discuss that. They weren't from Earth. And then he's also talking about the extraterrestrial question later in the interview. And he says something that I thought was noteworthy. He's like, you know, there's nothing so sensational about it. You know, the media and then Hollywood, you know, they play up a lot of the stuff. Some of it may be true, some of it's not true. And, you know, sensationalizing this, I mean, you know, making it so crazy and exciting, you know, that doesn't help. Because really the reality can be quite normal. You know, sometimes extraterrestrials just come here, and, you know, sometimes two people from different worlds and different cultures, you just sit down, share food, share ideas. Number 6. This idea, this fucked up idea of a civilization in the mantle, in the Earth's mantle. Wasn't there some Xbox game where you have to kill this sort of race of people that come up from the Earth, and they have like really white skin and they're not humans? And I don't, but that's an idea that's been explored. It's kind of like hostile. So why would a civilization live in the center of the, not in the center, but in the mantle? Supposedly because that's the most stable part of the planet over many millions of years. Like the surface gets, you know, change with rising sea levels and ice ages and erosion and meteors and all atmospheric problems, storms, all that stuff. And then, of course, the center of the Earth, there's, well, you can't live there, but above that there's the magma, and it's too hot, and so you wouldn't be able to live there. However, maybe the mantle, they make this argument that it would be the most stable area in the middle of that rock, and the solid rock. So you never know. That would be pretty fun. No one fucking knows what it looks like down there. But we do know that there's a shitload of water in the mantle of the Earth. Like a lot of water. Like maybe even as much water as we have in all of our oceans. Because this water is trapped in the tectonic plates that get sucked down. And then it, I guess, eventually turns into steam, but it can't escape. So it forms these huge pockets. We don't have a good understanding of if it's like water in rock or if it's an actual cavity where you have an ocean there. Who fucking knows? How do you get down there? Number 7. Fuck George Clooney. That guy is an idiot. What was he saying before the election? I mean, lots of Hollywood people are idiots. Most of them are. And they're all obviously very biased against Donald Trump, but George Clooney was giving some press conference, and someone asked him about Donald Trump. This was probably a few months before the election. He's like, Donald Trump is not going to get elected. Come on, people. That's not going to happen. You can look that up online. Number 8. Okay, this is a little story involving the very real British materialist, scientific materialist, what is he, a geneticist, author, Richard Dawkins. He's well known for his publishing his book, The God Delusion. Anyways, he's having a public discussion in an auditorium with a few other scientists on stage there, and at this point they're taking questions from the audience. And someone asks Mr. Dawkins to explain what he thinks of free will. And Mr. Dawkins, you know, this can be a difficult question because if you don't believe in a soul or any mind, independent mind, then basically there can't be free will. So Mr. Dawkins is like, well, though I have this sense of free will, I am deluding myself. Yes, I'm deluding myself. And then he pauses, and it's kind of like he's hanging on a word there, so the other people on stage and the audience, like, is he going to say something more? And then Richard Dawkins is like, oh! And then his mouth starts to open. And actually keeps opening, and his jaw actually breaks off and spins away this way. And the rest of his head breaks off and spins away this way. And by the way, the break goes all the way down the neck, like it continues. Like it's like his whole body following the two pieces of the jaw break off and spin away. And then he actually swallows himself and disappears into a little tiny point. But this tiny little point is distorting all the air around it. So you're looking at it and it's like, oh, it kind of looks like a mirage or like a, heat, like how air, kind of waves in heat. It's like this weird, like, what is that? And everyone in the auditorium is like, what the fuck? And then it's this terrible sound, this whistling sound, but not a nice whistling sound. It's really like screeching sound, this sucking noise. And it's this like dimensional rift. And people start getting sucked in. Like some of the other scientists on stage are like, get sucked into this hole, this tiny hole. But you have to understand the dimensional rift here. It's sucking everything, and perhaps it's like a black hole, or maybe it's related. I don't know. But this dimensional rift, you can think of it like a whirlpool getting bigger, starting to suck things in. People, chairs, papers, lights. The carpet, it's all getting sucked into this this dimensional rift, and thankfully Dan Aykroyd is in the audience, and that guy knows what to do. He knows exactly, he doesn't make, he's not too emotional or anything. He just gets up and he goes and he like pulls the goddamn fire alarm, and the sprinklers come on. The sprinklers are spraying down. And that electromagnetic effect of that water, it basically weakens the pull of this dimensional rift. It weakens its magnetic force. And so that growing effect is now switched inwards, so it starts contracting back into itself, and poof, it disappears because he was able to contain it and send it spinning away back into itself. And basically, so it's gone. There's a lot of stuff sucked out of the auditorium. It was pretty fucked. Like people were screaming when this was happening, and so later on, let's say I was there. I was observing. I was in the audience. I didn't get injured or anything. But later on, the police are investigating, and I'm standing with Dan Aykroyd outside the building on the sidewalk, and he's having a smoke, and I'm having a smoke because he gave me a smoke, which was pretty cool. And I thanked him. I say, Mr. Aykroyd, I just got to thank you for saving the day, and for saving all of us. And you probably saved the planet. That thing could have kept growing, and so thank you. And he's like, he's not too. He's like, oh, don't, it's not much. And basically, I asked him about the people. I was like, so Mr. Aykroyd, like 12 people, including Richard Dawkins and some of his friends, like they got sucked into that hole. Like what happened to them? And Mr. Aykroyd, he tells me, he's like, buddy, they're gone. They got sucked into pure nothingness. Then he gives me his card, and I look at his card, and on Dan Aykroyd's card it says, Dan Aykroyd, serious knowledge, minimal talking, professional. Number 9. Do young people today know who Timothy McVeigh is? Timothy McVeigh. Just look up the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, know about Osama bin Laden, and people like, oh, by the way, for you younglings out there, the World Trade Center got bombed twice, actually. Got bombed in the early 90s, but it didn't do too much. So yeah, and maybe in third grade class, have a little thing about Timothy McVeigh, like his life and what he did and what he ended up getting executed. So, number 10. I know I've already talked about some history here, but it's time for the historical fact of the week. Historical fact of the week. The Europeans coming into the Americas in the 1500s, 1600s, they brought a host of diseases to the Native Americans which decimated their populations, like smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis. So the question is, did any Native American diseases manage to go the other way from the Americas to Europe? And the answer is yes. Syphilis. Number 11, Jimmy Kimmel. And I don't watch TV, but most people know who Jimmy Kimmel is because his show's been pretty popular for a while. He's kind of frog-like, wouldn't you say? Look at his eyes. kind of the mouth, maybe the throat a little bit. Maybe it's the shape of his lower body. I don't know. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel's not. I don't hate Jimmy Kimmel. He's not great. He's not awful. He's more smart. He's definitely more intelligent than some of the people out there on television. So I'm not necessarily disrespecting him for being a frog, because I think frogs can be symbols of rebirth and intelligence in many cultures. But you have to see the frog, that he is frog-like, that he may be like slightly a frog-like man with frog ancestors. So he's been known to swallow pigeons or doves. Like, you bring a dove for a certain gig and you're not looking, and then you look back, where's the dove? And there's just like a feather in the air, and yeah, that's how frogs, they don't chew. Frogs don't chew. They just swallow. And then people working around him on the Jimmy Kimmel show, he's the center of the show. So if Jimmy says, I'd like the temperature to be a certain level, I'd like the humidifiers to be, pumping out a certain level of moisture, then, you accommodate that. You go along with him, and you don't ask questions. Right? This is Jimmy's show. And then let's say you have to meet with, I don't know, Larry David or some other famous Hollywood guy, or some producer. They meet with Jimmy Kimmel to discuss a segment, to discuss some idea for the show. And you're meeting with Jimmy, just you and him in his office. And you look to the side and you see these like huge, at first it looks like eyeballs. It's like these kind of in an aquarium. You're like, oh, that's not eyeballs. What the hell are those? They look like kind of like transparent eggs, like gelatinous eggs with like kind of like kiwi seed looking dark pit inside of it. And Mr. Kimmel, what are those? And he's like, oh, I see you found my children. And this leads to a really awkward pause, and you're like, Mr. Kimmel? And then Mr. Kimmel starts looking at you, and then you, meeting with Mr. Kimmel, you start backing away, very slowly, backing away, keeping eye contact, not leaving eye contact. That's very important, but backing away, away. Number 12. I want to, talk about the Daily Show, since I've been talking about Jimmy Kimmel show. And I like Jimmy Kimmel. Don't really like the Daily Show. Never really did watch it. Even with Jon Stewart, I thought all that shit was stupid. So, anyways, the Daily Show invites with Trevor Noah now, a guy from South Africa. They invite someone like an animal handler on with an orangutan. And so they're talking to the handler. Oh, how did you ever become an animal person? And what's this orangutan's name? Oh, the name is Claire. Like, she's pretty friendly. But at some point, Trevor Noah, he reaches out to like touch the orangutan, and like the handler is like, no, don't do that. She doesn't like that. And then the ape just goes batshit insane. And it takes Trevor Noah by his arm. And if you have any idea how strong an ape is, it is nothing like a human. Like a chimpanzee could, in a room with Mike Tyson, would tear him to pieces. It would tear him limb from limb. So this orangutan, upset because it's being touched in its own special area. So it takes Trevor Noah by his forearm and just like throws him like a rag doll. Just like throws him at a wall. And he just goes sailing 30 feet and he slams into this wall. And then, of course, just like with Richard Dawkins in The Dimensional Rift, this is a scene with a lot of screaming. People don't know what to do. And because this is New York City, and in any case you're getting frisked to enter this building, no one has a gun. Until finally they get the cops to come in there, and the cops have their guns drawn. But at that point, it's like the ape has calmed down, and they're like, oh, she seems all right. Where's her handler? And the handler comes and tranquilizes her, and it's okay. The ape doesn't get hurt. She's okay. People like the ape, and then the people are like, hey, where's Trevor? Where's Mr. Trevor Noah? And they just look, and they look at the wall, and it's like this huge gaping hole in the drywall. So they just see this hole in the drywall. Number 13. This idea that most aliens are telepathic, so they can communicate without speaking, and actually speaking for them would be kind of childlike. They'd be like, oh, you just speak, you're pretty primitive, your whole race is primitive, we just speak with our minds. And so these few aliens that have been captured by militaries or governments on Earth, they've been able to use their telepathic ability to communicate with people in this way, which has definitely helped them. It's like, tell them where I'm from, what kind of food do I need to eat. And however, it's said that some of these aliens do not have this telepathic ability. And in the few occasions when they've crashed on Earth and when they've been apprehended by governments, most of them are so depressed because they can't communicate with anyone that they simply stop eating and drinking until they die. Number 14. Kyle Lowry of the Toronto Raptors. I totally respect this guy. He's one of the reasons that the Toronto Raptors have definitely taken a turn for the better in the last few years and turned around the franchise. And he's an excellent point guard. And a lot of athletes are good people, and they want to give back to the community. And Kyle Lowry wants to do the same thing. So I was reading an article a few weeks ago about just before Christmas, and Kyle took a bunch of underprivileged children shopping. He on an all expenses paid shopping spree at Toys R Us. You know, Toys R Us, a toy store, department store, maybe a few other stores. So the kids get to buy all the stuff that makes them feel good. And I just think this is really funny because most athletes, rich people, they want to help, but they don't know how. They don't fucking have any idea. So, oh, here, buy some toys. That's really going to help you. How lame is that? Yeah, in the new year, you'll sure be better off. It's ridiculous. Oh, I mean, Kyle, you've been in Toronto for a few years here. You want to really help the community. Why don't you start a business? It doesn't take that much. You can start a business with $10,000. And I'm sure you have $10,000 to throw out. Or even $50,000. They say, hey, here's money to rent a place for a whole year. Sure, you're busy as an athlete. Just find someone you can trust. Start a partnership. You still have like legal control of 50% of the business. You still get to keep an eye on it, see how it's doing. Start something in the community as a business. How complicated is that? People have no idea how to help the poor. So we just, ends up doing something simple that makes us feel good. So Kyle Lowry, you mean well, but your idea failed. Okay, amigos. Hasta luego.